Greetings and welcome to today's session, prepared by the HSE department.
This presentation outlines Al Masood Energy's comprehensive guide to personal protective equipment requirements, selection, use, and maintenance. The contents of this presentation will include the following: awareness objectives and deliverables. Introduction and purpose of PPE. PPE types and requirements, matrix. Fall protection equipment. Hazard assessment and PPE selection. Proper use, maintenance and storage. Training and compliance. Scenarios and quiz. Reporting and documentation. Operational controls and LPR. Conclusion. The objective of this awareness session is to ensure participants understand the purpose and scope of the Al Masood Energy PPE program as defined in Al Masood Energy EHSMSP 14. Identify and select task-specific PPE using the Al Masood Energy PPE matrix based on hazard exposure. Apply the best practices for PPE inspection, use, cleaning, and storage to maintain equipment effectiveness. Fall protection knowledge requirements, including pre-use and monthly inspection protocols and mandatory retirement rules for fall arrest equipment. System integration, ensuring PPE requirements are fully integrated with hazard identification, HIRAC/JSA, permit to work, and life protection rules. The awareness objectives for Al Masood Energy focus on 5 core goals: understanding the personal protective equipment program as defined in AME EHSMSP 14, identifying task-specific PPE using the AME PPE matrix based on hazard exposure, applying best practices for the inspection, usage, cleaning, and storage of equipment, gaining fall protection knowledge regarding inspection protocols and mandatory retirement rules, and integrating these requirements with hazard identification, HIRAC, JSA, permit to work, and life protection rules. These objectives are supported by several awareness deliverables, which include knowledge acquisition to distinguish PPE definitions and limitations, practical selection for common tasks based on hazard identification, and proper documentation through the completion of mandatory PPE declaration forms and training records. Additionally, the program requires digital reporting of PPE deficiencies through the ERP/QR system and a firm commitment to compliance with ADASH-SF, ISO 45001, and ISO 14001 standards to ensure a safer workplace. Why this matters. The critical importance of safety through a zero-harm core goal, which aims to protect people, assets, and the environment by treating PPE as the essential last line of defense. This integrated approach ensures that health, safety, and environmental protocols are embedded into every operational procedure, including permit-to-work systems. Employees are granted total empowerment with the absolute authority and obligation to stop work if safety standards are not met, using the ERP system to report deficiencies immediately. Success relies on active participation, where everyone is responsible for their own PPE and for enforcing compliance among colleagues, reinforcing the philosophy that safety is not a spectator sport but a collective responsibility. The key objective is to educate Al Masood employees on several critical aspects of workplace safety, starting with defining PPE and its strategic program purpose. Participants will learn to apply the AME PPE matrix to determine mandatory gear for specific roles and areas, as well as how to select the correct PPE based on hazard assessments like HIRAC and JSA for various operational tasks. Additionally, the session covers the importance of maintenance and replacement, including pre-use inspections and the prompt disposal of damaged equipment. Finally, employees are instructed on how to report deficiencies immediately and align their actions with Life Protection Rule Number 1, which focuses on identifying and using the proper PPE. Personal protective equipment, PPE, is defined as equipment worn to shield workers from hazards when risks cannot be eliminated, including clothing, helmets, goggles, and other garments designed to protect the body from injury or infection. To be effective, PPE must be properly fitted and maintained. Its primary purpose is to prevent exposure by limiting contact with chemical, physical, biological, and other workplace hazards, serving as a complementary control that works alongside engineering and administrative measures. Crucially, PPE is not a substitute for safe work practices or eliminating hazards at the source, but rather a final layer of defense for comprehensive safety. The PPE Matrix Overview provides a detailed map of mandatory protective equipment for various work activities, serving as a critical resource during hazard identification, HIRAC, job safety analysis, JSA, and the issuance of permits to work, PTW. For general site access, mandatory protection includes head, eye, face, foot, and body gear. Grinding and cutting tasks require specific equipment such as a shield for eye-face protection, cut impact-resistant hand protection, and respiratory protection based on assessment. Welding operations necessitate specialized gear like welding helmets, leather gloves, and aprons, along with fume-specific respiratory protection. For chemical handling, the matrix mandates chemical-resistant goggles, footwear, gloves, and body protection, supplemented by a respirator. Working at height, over 1.8 m, requires a chin strap for head protection and a safety harness for the body. Finally, electrical work demands highly specialized safeguards, including Class E head protection, face shields, EH-rated footwear, insulated gloves, and ARC-rated body protection. Eye and face protection. All equipment must be ANSI Z87.1 approved, and accommodate prescription lenses without compromising fit or safety. This PPE is mandatory for protecting against hazards such as flying particles, dust and debris, molten metal and heat, sparks and splashes, chemicals and gases, and light radiation, UV-IR rays. To ensure maximum efficacy, employees must match their PPE to specific hazards, for instance, combining a face shield with goggles for grinding while ensuring a secure, gap-free fit. Maintenance protocols require daily cleaning with mild soap or lens wipes to prevent fogging and vision impairment, alongside regular inspections for scratches or pits. Equipment must be replaced immediately if lenses are damaged, frames are bent or broken, or if elastic bands lose their elasticity. The HSE department mandates that all hard hats must be ANSI Z89.1 approved or equivalent, and while bump caps are generally prohibited due to insufficient protection, drivers are exempted from this rule. Mandatory requirements include strict adherence to AME color coding for role identification and ensuring equipment provides protection against falling objects, fixed object impact, and electrical shock. Maintenance and care procedures involve daily inspections of the suspension system for fraying or cuts, ensuring a minimum 1-inch clearance is maintained. Hard hats should be cleaned regularly with mild soap and warm water, avoiding solvents or harsh chemicals that can weaken the plastic shell. Immediate replacement is required if there are visible cracks, holes, or shell deformations, if suspension straps are frayed or broken, or following any significant impact even if no damage is visible. Hand protection, gloves, guidelines, emphasizes that gloves are a critical defense against cuts, chemical exposure, and thermal hazards. The document categorizes glove types by specific hazards, including cut-resistant for sharp objects, chemical-resistant for acids and oils, heat/thermal for welding, and impact gloves for heavy material handling. Under the P14 requirements, it mandates the use of appropriate gloves, routine inspections for damage before each use, and proper care such as regular cleaning in dry storage. Finally, it highlights a key limitation: no single glove protects against all hazards, warning that using the wrong type, such as cotton gloves for chemicals, is dangerous and that personnel should always consult the Safety Data Sheet, SDS, and PPE Matrix. Foot protection guidelines state that heavy-duty protective footwear is mandatory for all site activities and must include steel or composite toe caps for crush protection and deep tread, slip-resistant soles for uneven or wet surfaces. Prohibited footwear includes sneakers, slippers, sandals, and open-toed shoes. For maintenance and care, employees are required to keep shoes dry, clean off mud and chemicals daily, and conduct daily inspections for embedded objects or damaged laces. Safety shoes must be replaced immediately if the toe cap is exposed or dented, the soles are worn smooth, or the leather is torn or separating. Hearing protection outlined the standards for managing occupational noise exposure, stating that hearing protection is mandatory when sound levels exceed 90 dB over an 8-hour workday, with impulsive noise capped at 140 dB. Following the hierarchy of controls, PPE is considered the last line of defense, to be used only if engineering controls, such as relocating sources or using enclosures, and administrative controls, like limiting exposure time, fail to reduce noise below permissible limits. Furthermore, when these threshold values are exceeded, a comprehensive hearing conservation program is required, which includes mandatory training, ensuring the proper fit of hearing protection, and conducting regular audiometric testing. Respiratory protection focuses on usage, selection, and maintenance. It states that respiratory protection is mandatory whenever airborne hazards like dust, fumes, or gases cannot be controlled through engineering or administrative measures. Selection must be based on the specific contaminant type, requiring proper fit testing and user competency. Furthermore, equipment must be stored in a clean, dry, and sanitary location, with filters and cartridges replaced regularly based on their condition and frequency of use. The following outlines mandatory requirements and maintenance guidelines for high-visibility clothing to ensure worker safety. Employees must wear high-visibility vests or clothing in specific high-risk zones, including vehicle traffic areas, near mobile equipment operations like forklifts and cranes, during low-visibility conditions such as night or fog, and when entering jetty or yard areas. To maintain effectiveness, garments should be kept clean of dirt and grease, properly zipped to avoid entanglement, and worn as the outermost layer to prevent blocking the reflective material. Clothing must be replaced immediately if the material is faded, the reflective tape is damaged, the garment is permanently soiled, or if there are rips that compromise its integrity. The following outlines additional PPE requirements for specific tasks based on operational controls and LPR. For electrical work, arc-rated PPE is mandatory when working on or near energized equipment, and insulated tools must be used for all live works. Chemical handling, including hazardous substance management or mixing, requires chemical goggles with indirect venting, impervious aprons, and chemical-resistant gloves. Hot work, welding, and cutting require fire-resistant clothing, face shields, and heat-resistant gloves for general tasks, while welding and cutting specifically necessitate a welding helmet or shield and leather gauntlets. Finally, materials handling for manual lifting, rigging, and warehouse operations requires impact gloves and safety shoes to prevent crush and impact injuries. Fall protection equipment specifies that work at heights exceeding 1.8 meters is a mandatory requirement governed by protocols AME/EHSMS P14 and P11. The slide outlines the essential system components for worker safety, which include a full body harness, lanyards or self-retracting lifelines, SRL, designated anchor points, and lifelines along with rescue gear. The primary types of fall protection systems emphasizes that a complete system must include an anchor point, bodywear such as a full body harness, and a connecting device like a lanyard or lifeline. The document details specific requirements for these components, noting that a full body harness must meet ANSI Z359.11 or EN 361 standards to distribute forces across the body, while lanyards, including fixed length and self-retracting lifelines, must incorporate shock absorbers that limit impact forces to less than 6 knots. Anchor points are required to support at least 22 knots, 5,000 lbf, per person and must remain independent of work platform supports. Additionally, lifelines can be horizontal or vertical and must be engineer certified, while rescue equipment, such as descenders and pulleys, is listed as a critical requirement that must be supported by a formal rescue plan to retrieve suspended workers safely. Fall protection inspection outlines mandatory pre-use user checks, emphasizing that all components must be visually and physically inspected before donning. The user inspection checklist requires workers to examine webbing and straps for cuts, burns, or UV damage, stitching for pulled or broken threads, hardware like D-rings and buckles for distortion or corrosion, and labels to ensure they are legible. Proper fit is achieved when the harness is snug, the D-ring is centered between the shoulder blades, and the chest strap is correctly positioned. If any defects are discovered, the protocol mandates immediate critical action. Do not use the equipment, tag the item as out of service, and remove it from service while reporting the issue to a supervisor or HSE representative, reinforcing the message to never gamble with fall protection equipment. Fall protection inspection outlines mandatory pre-use user checks, emphasizing that all components must be visually and physically inspected before donning. The user inspection checklist requires workers to examine webbing and straps for cuts, burns, or UV damage, stitching for pulled or broken threads, hardware like D-rings and buckles for distortion or corrosion, and labels to ensure they are legible. Proper fit is achieved when the harness is snug, the D-ring is centered between the shoulder blades, and the chest strap is correctly positioned. If any defects are discovered, the protocol mandates immediate critical action. Do not use the equipment, tag the item as out of service, and remove it from service while reporting the issue to a supervisor or HSE representative, reinforcing the message to never gamble with fall protection equipment. Fall protection retirement criteria mandates the immediate removal from service and destruction of safety equipment under 5 specific conditions: if it has been involved in a fall arrest event, regardless of visible damage, if it has exceeded its manufacturer's specified service life, typically 5 to 10 years, if severe visible damage such as cuts deeper than 1 mm or frayed webbing is found, if there is evidence of chemical or environmental deterioration like brittleness or discoloration, or if the equipment has an uncertain history where its usage or origin cannot be verified. The hazard assessment process follows a HIRAC, JSA methodology consisting of 4 primary steps: identifying hazards through reviews and worker consultation, evaluating risk based on frequency and severity, determining controls by prioritizing engineering and administrative solutions over PPE, and conducting regular reassessments. This process is triggered by the start of new activities, changes in processes, post-incident reviews, or scheduled annual validations to ensure that safety measures remain effective and accurate. The PPE selection outlines a 4-step process for optimal protection, emphasizing that PPE is the last line of defense. The process begins by becoming familiar with workplace hazards and understanding the capabilities and limitations of available equipment, followed by comparing those options to specific environmental hazards like chemical or physical risks. The 3rd step advises selecting equipment that provides a level of protection greater than the absolute minimum required, and the final step focuses on fitting the user with comfortable protection while providing instruction on proper use, care, and warning labels. Key factors to consider throughout this selection include ensuring a proper fit to increase compliance, verifying compatibility between items like glasses and earmuffs, meeting ANSI or EN certification standards, and involving workers in the selection process through user feedback. Task-specific PPE requirements outlines the protocols for aligning personal protective equipment with operational hazards. It instructs employees to apply the PPE matrix for critical activities such as hot work, confined spaces, electrical work, lifting operations, machining, and chemical handling, while referencing document EHSMSP 11 for detailed requirements. A significant focus is placed on permit to work, PTW, integration, stating that PPE is a mandatory condition of the permit and must be verified during pre-job briefings. Additionally, the slide defines compliance and verification expectations for supervisors, who are responsible for enforcing PPE usage without exception, inspecting gear condition, and immediately stopping work if critical equipment is missing. Proper use of personal protective equipment, PPE, emphasizes that equipment effectiveness depends entirely on correct application, fit, and awareness of limitations. The first section, Fit and Usage Standards, highlights the importance of correct sizing to avoid snag hazards or restricted circulation, the necessity of following manufacturer procedures for donning and doffing to maintain seals and avoid contamination, and a strict rule against any modifications that could void certifications or compromise structural integrity. The second section, Limitations and Integrity, addresses equipment compatibility to ensure combined gear, like safety glasses and earmuffs, doesn't interfere with each other's fit, while also urging workers to understand specific protection ratings because PPE is not a suit of armor. Finally, the guide mandates the immediate replacement of any compromised gear, such as cracked helmets or torn gloves, following the core safety principle, when in doubt, throw it out. The procedures for PPE inspection and maintenance ensures equipment effectiveness and compliance. It defines user responsibilities, stating that employees must inspect their assigned PPE before each use, keep it clean, and immediately report any defects to supervision without using the damaged gear. Additionally, the HSE department is tasked with monitoring compliance through monthly inspections across all departments to verify adherence to the PPE policy and matrix. Finally, the guidelines emphasize the importance of maintaining accurate records and documentation, such as checklists, status tags, and ERP logs, to ensure traceability and demonstrate ongoing commitment to safety standards. Cleaning and storage emphasizes that regular maintenance of PPE prevents skin irritation, ensures visibility, and extends equipment longevity. Cleaning protocols specify daily care for eye and face protection with mild soap or wipes, wiping hard hat shells and harnesses with soapy water before air drying them away from heat, and removing debris from footwear while washing reusable gloves according to manufacturer instructions. For storage and disposal, equipment must be kept in clean, dry areas away from sunlight, chemicals, and extreme temperatures, ensuring no heavy items cause deformation and that harnesses are hung by the D-ring. Finally, disposal procedures require that contaminated, non-decontaminable PPE be safely contained and disposed of according to approved protocols. As hazardous waste and physically destroying old items, such as cutting harness straps or damaging helmets, to strictly prevent accidental reuse. The employee training requirements outlines mandatory standards for all Al-Masood Energy personnel, specifically focusing on a training curriculum that covers when PPE is necessary, how to properly don, doff, adjust, and wear it, its limitations, and proper care, maintenance, and disposal procedures. Furthermore, employees are required to provide a competency demonstration to prove they can use the equipment properly before starting work, as failure to comply with these PPE policies can lead to violation notifications, injury, and disciplinary action in accordance with personnel policies. The HSE department's digital reporting workflow for PPE deficiencies outlines a three-step process starting with accessing the system by scanning a site QR code or using the ERP app's AME HSE reporting module. Once accessed, users must submit details by selecting the category Observation, ESTOP, or Incident and providing a description along with mandatory photo evidence. The final stage involves follow-up and closure, where the user receives a unique ERP tracking ID to monitor the status as HSE verifies and resolves the issue. This digital approach is utilized to ensure clear photo evidence for faster maintenance, precise location accuracy for repairs, real-time notifications for supervisors, and a protected, non-retribution environment for all employees. Al-Masood Energy's Life Protection Rule No. 1, titled Identify Proper PPE and Conduct Risk Assessment, establishes a non-negotiable golden rule requiring appropriate personal protective equipment and risk assessments for all activities across every site. This policy outlines specific accountabilities for different roles. Workers must correctly use specified PPE and report any equipment gaps or damage. Supervisors are tasked with strictly enforcing compliance, providing coaching, and authorizing permits to work, PTW, only when all PPE requirements are met, and the HSE department is responsible for delivering awareness, monitoring compliance trends through inspections, and recognizing positive safety behaviors.
PPE Scenarios, Sample Quiz 1. Test your knowledge on PPE selection. Scenario. You are assigned to perform grinding job on carbon steel in the main workshop. Question. Which PPE items are mandatory for this task? Select the most complete and correct option. Identifying option B as the correct answer, a face shield combined with goggles, gloves, hearing protection, and safety shoes. The explanation provided notes that grinding generates high-velocity particles and noise, necessitating double eye protection and hearing protection for noise levels exceeding 85 dB, while also mentioning that hard hats remain mandatory in all operational areas.
PPE Scenarios, Sample Quiz 2. Test your knowledge on PPE selection. Scenario. You are transferring a corrosive chemical from a drum pump in the storage area. Question. Choose the correct PPE set for this task. Select the most complete and correct option. The correct answer is identified as option A, which requires nitrile gloves, chemical goggles, a face shield, a chemical apron, and safety shoes. The provided justification explains that because corrosive chemicals pose severe skin and eye hazards, full splash protection, consisting of a face shield over goggles, and impervious clothing like aprons and nitrile gloves are mandatory. Additionally, safety shoes used for this task must be either chemical resistant or covered. The PPE conclusions and key takeaways emphasize that personal protective equipment serves as the last line of defense when hazards persist, requiring selection via HIRAC, JSA, and the AME PPE matrix. The document mandates that workers inspect PPE before every use, maintain cleanliness, and store gear in designated dry areas to ensure reliability. Strict fall protection rigor is also required, including 6 monthly competent inspections and the immediate retirement of any equipment involved in a fall or found damaged. To support a zero-harm goal, all deficiencies must be reported immediately through the ERP/QR system, aligning with the Permit to Work (PTW) protocols and life protection rule. Let's continue working together to make a positive impact and drive excellence across our organization. Following this awareness session, please take a moment to complete the training evaluation questionnaire. Kindly submit your responses to HSE Department for our records.